Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma pleure sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Are you proud to be an American? Hope so. If so, how proud? Let's take a look at some new numbers. This is from the Gallup organization. 47%, so nearly half of Americans say they're extremely proud to be Americans. Another 25% say they're very proud. 16% say they're only moderately proud. 3% say not at all. 7% only a little. And like everything else in the country, on this question here, race politics, it's divided a lot by party lines. 47% of all Americans, remember, that's down 4 points from just last year. Only a third of Democrats are extremely proud to be an American. That's dropped 11 points. You can guess why. Republicans, 74% say they're extremely proud. That's up a little bit. Independents has dropped about 4 points since last year. That's a tough constituency for President Trump. You see all this play out as we go through it here. Are you proud or embarrassed to have Donald Trump as your president? Half of Americans say they're embarrassed. 31% say they're proud, 18% say neither. Views of the president impact views of just about everything else, including whether you're proud to be an American. Now, on this debate, Democrats would say, maybe I'm less proud this year because I don't like Donald Trump. Rush Limbaugh would say, the Democrats are the problem here.
Be American. Go out and just do what you would normally be inclined to do, but don't be intimidated into flying the flag. Don't be intimidated by any patriotic activity. Whatever it is, guilt or hatred, there is a rising percentage of the Democrat Party that simply doesn't like this country and does not think America should remain America.
Even the 4th of July is subject to our polarization. Really?
I think it was interesting with those statistics that you showed. You showed year over year, right? Which would have meant July of 2017. Trump was president then. It would have been interesting, I think, to see 2016, where you would have seen a bigger switch, right? You would have probably seen more Democrats saying they're proud of America. And
fewer Republicans.
Well, Trump had clinched the nomination, so
right. So who knows? Maybe
sure.
Go back to 15,
yeah.
or whatever. But I do think that what it shows is less about fundamentally where America is, and broadly, and more about this partisan divide, specifically about our politics and the White House.
Right. The peak, extremely proud, was 70% in 2003. Which was a year and a half removed from 9/11, which, of course, the country rallied around without a doubt. So this is the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. We talked earlier in the program about how critical he is to the Supreme Court nomination. Listen to the Majority Leader here. He's home in Kentucky this week, and he says, yes, he understands some Democrats are completely freaked out by Trump. He says, guess what? Some Republicans are completely unnerved by President Trump, too. Mitch McConnell says, take the long view. America's 242 years old today. We'll be okay.
So whether you're freaked out on the left or freaked out on the right, don't worry. Nobody can break this country.
Can we at least all agree on that, or no?
I think it's a nice message to hear amidst the panic that we live in, day to day.
But I think a lot of people are worried that maybe no one can break it, but they can certainly damage it. I mean, I think that's really the concern.
Well, sure.
Like a lot of Republicans felt that way, when Obama was president. I mean, the reality is this is still a country where both sides are allowed to be freaked out. Both sides are allowed to be out there publicly explaining who is freaking them out and why, because this is still a country where you have a lot of free will and you have a lot of rights, and that has not changed based on who the president is.
The definition of somebody who never seems to be freaked out is Mitch McConnell. I don't know what I would do if I saw a freak out by Mitch. Maybe it's on the inside.
That was
calmer than most.
That was his freaked out look. What are you talking about? Well, his counterpart. Again, this is not just Chuck Schumer. We live in a 365-day-a-year political cycle now, 24/7, trying to use the 4th of July to make a point here, tweeting out, "Today I'm celebrating the freedom, all caps, of women to make their own health care decisions as established by the Supreme Court in Roe v. Wade. Today I am celebrating the freedom of every American to choose to marry the person they love as established by the Supreme Court in Obergefell versus Hodges. Will you join me at Real Donald Trump?" Trying to keep his liberal base happy and stir up a little conversation on Independence Day.
Politics does not take a day off, apparently, not even on the 4th of July. I'm actually surprised we haven't seen more from the president, but he's made it clear. He thinks America is great.
He's golfing,
he's golfing. He said he thinks America is great, but if you had asked him 2 years ago, he probably would have said America's going down the toilet. So, I mean, look, partisanship is what rules.
It's being made great once again.
Well, I'm going to work this in, and I'll probably get yelled at by somebody for it, but Hillary Clinton tweeting on the 4th of July, 242 years ago, we set out to build a more perfect union. We're not finished yet. Happy 4th of July. Now, you could say that any 4th of July because we never will be finished, but some people will take that as her making a point.
Well, sure. Look, America is very much still a work in progress, and it's going to ebb and flow, and that's going to freak some people out whatever direction you're going, like it did under Obama, like it's doing now under Trump.
It is Friday, the 6th of July of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, folks, because we are all Nighthawks in the dire of life, indeed. Well, John King, what about John King? I have to say that one could blame this on John King and his producers being tone deaf. But we know how media works now. There's a narrative that is being pushed. Nothing is left up to chance. They have meetings and mull these particular clips of what they're going to run and when and how. And sometimes they talk about even why. And I find it no accident that John King would blame Democrats and liberals. The both sides. Oh, they both do it. They both do it. But he plays that clip of Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh. Come on. Yes, liberals and Democrats specifically are the real racist traitors who hate America. We know that. And we've been told that many, many times. And when we point out how much of that is projection, we are blamed for polarizing America. Yep. It's sort of like, my family in law enforcement. A couple of them don't understand why people just don't do what the cops tell them to do. Why won't they comply? I'm the cop. They have to do what I say. And I try to explain to them, in a representative democratic republic, you kind of have to follow this thing called the rule of law. And when people feel harassed, and I know from the other point of view is that, every crook I ever arrested claimed that their constitutional rights were being violated, and they were still a crook. Of course, then I would always bring up the metaphysical argument of when you look at the immensity of time in the universe, can you really say that your experience is enough that a pattern is being set? When your little time there is just... But you can't get into that kind of discussion with someone who's been taking steroids and carries a gun. Oh, yeah, another little inside info. Police captains want their troops to be, intimidating, don't they? That's why they always turn a blind eye. Speaking of a blind eye, Jim Jordan is blaming all of these wrestlers coming out of the woodwork from Ohio State, not just wrestlers, but basically the whole of the athletic departments. I think even the badminton team had to drop their pants to this guy, Dr. Strauss. Is it safe? And Jim Jordan calls it a deep state conspiracy. That's when you know it's true. He probably was part of the actual, I don't know, showering with the kids. Yeah. Okay. Well, Jim Jordan, I don't know what it is about wrestlers who get into politics. Yeah. Yeah. Creepy. All right. Well, what's on the rest of the menu? There's so much news out there right now. Actually, had look. Some things jumped out at me, is what I'm trying to say. And sad story. A Thai diver died. He died on. Thai diver dies as rescue teams ponder how to bring out trapped boys. You know, they were teaching the kids how to dive, basically, through their cell phone or however they're communicating with them. And some of the kids can't even swim. Ugh. All right. Well, I hope that turns out good. The Statue of Liberty climber pleads not guilty after her immigration protest. I like that she was up there just sitting placidly and saying, come and get me. And they did. And I just loved hearing the commentary at the time, how much, she was putting people's lives in danger. Well, when you're separating kids and not giving them a bath for 82 months, maybe it warrants a little bit of, I'm not saying putting people's lives in danger, but that's kind of putting people's lives in danger, isn't it? All right. It's a matter of scale, shall we say. Oh, remember that cult, the cult in Japan that poisoned people with sarin in the subway there? I don't know, a couple of decades ago now. They executed that cult leader and 6 of his followers in Japan yesterday. Yeah. Finally, I guess some folks would say. And a pillar of the American right predicts dire and catastrophic consequences for the Trump-Putin summit, and that's George Will. Well, George, we were telling you way back when you were in the bow tie and making your baseball analogies constantly what was up, but you never listened. Because you didn't want to believe it, did you? Uh-huh. And now look what you've wrought. The monster you create is always a distillation and potent force that is manifested, from your own, worldview? You reap what you sow, George. You reap what you sow. What's on the rest of the menu? Well, also in the Bistro Cafe, the GOP governor of Illinois refuses to endorse the Democratic candidate over an actual Nazi. An actual Illinois Nazi. I hate Illinois Nazis. As the Blues Brothers would say. I hate all Nazis. But the guy needs a Republican even if it's an actual Nazi. Okay. Trump administration officials destroyed records of refugee kids who have been separated from their parents. Yeah, that's what you do. I mean, that's what Trump does. As soon as he gets something, he shreds it, sometimes tears it up in tiny little pieces. And the GOP threatens to kick 21 million people off health care if they win the midterms. Well, thanks for nothing. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Russia mocks Britain after 2 more people are poisoned with the same nerve agent and near the same park where a former spy and his daughter were nearly killed in March. And Trump fired Scott Pruitt without ever talking to him and had John Kelly do the dirty work just before he gets kicked out too. I wonder who's going to tell him. Hope Hicks? I think Hope Hicks is going to fire John. Wouldn't that be something? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. On the rightish of the page, you will notice the chat room link. Kelly Lincoln, Roaring Girl, monitors that for your Netroots Radio experiences. And to the leftish are the contribute donate buttons. We'll give you more information on that. Of course, we'll have to start those all over, and hopefully by the beginning of next week, those links will be live, and I'll make my plaintive entreaties once again. And you can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that platform. I take care of Facebook, but as I've mentioned before, Facebook takes care of itself. And what else? Oh, follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And do check out the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's. I can be found there as Justice Putnam. I try to put as many links as possible on all platforms for you. And the show notes and links are an integral part of the show, so check that out. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And we are on Facebook, too, at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And podcasts of the show can be found on TuneIn, Stitcher, Spreaker, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay, first article here, starting off in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, by the way, folks. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The French 77 is the cocktail of choice here. Yes, indeed. Have one. It's the most balanced cocktail in all of history. Yeah, of history. Okay. All right. Matthew Chapman out of Share Blue Media brings us this first article. Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner tied his tongue in knots when asked whether voters should back a Democrat over a literal Nazi running for Congress in his state. An actual Nazi. I mean, we're not just it's not just some, histrionics by those snowflake liberals and Democrats. No. Republicans were humiliated when they allowed Arthur Jones, a prominent Holocaust denier and former leader of the American Nazi Party, to win the GOP nomination in Illinois' 3rd Congressional District. But Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner has somehow found a way to make the situation even worse for his party by refusing to urge voters to choose the Democratic candidate over a literal Nazi. No, Rauner said when asked by reporters if he would endorse incumbent Democrat Dan Lipinski over Jones in the general election. The one thing I will say is the person, that guy Johnson or whatever his name is, should not be on the ballot. Oh, he shouldn't be on the ballot, but you just can't come out and say, in this situation, maybe you ought to vote for the Democrat because party over country, right? Bruce? Rauner's refusal makes no sense. Even for a Republican, this should not be a tough call. Jones has received broad condemnation from the Republican Party, including from Rauner himself, who said just in February, there is no room for neo-Nazis in American politics. Well, I think that Trump said there's many fine people on that side. He said it, and he continues to. Okay, even Ted Cruz. Oh, I'm sorry. Rauner's move doesn't even make sense in terms of partisan politics. This Chicago House district is not competitive, And Lipinski is a conservative Democrat who sides with the GOP on abortion and votes with Trump nearly 40% of the time. But he has the D on his name, and therefore he's the evil of evil. And that's the narrative. Remember I mentioned this before? Nothing is by accident. They have management meetings trying to figure out whether they're going to use the Oxford comma or not. All right? Means all the difference in the world, trust me. And this is a narrative. They have a story to tell. And the story they've been telling for so long is that Democratic liberals, those hippies, are the reason that we have all of this shithole country. And you look around and you go, God, America the beautiful. This land is your land, and this land is my land, from California to the New York Islands. This land was made for you and me. Well, not just for you and me, but everything in between, you might say. Well, even Ted Cruz, one of the most shameless GOP partisans in office, urged Illinois voters to choose the Democrat in this race rather than back a Nazi. But apparently Rauner is not even capable of meeting this low bar. Well, trust me, Ted Cruz. By today, he'll have changed his mind and say, I made a grave error. If you don't vote for the Democrat, just don't vote at all. Wink, wink. It's okay. The Nazis fine. There's some very fine people on that side. Donnie even said so. Yep. Okay. So in February, Rauner awkwardly drank a glass of chocolate milk as a public demonstration of his commitment to diversity. I drink white milk and I drink chocolate milk. Can't we all just get along? Wow. That's kind of like synthesizing it into a narrative, isn't it now? Of all the governors up for re-election this year, Rauner, a billionaire former private equity executive, is probably the most vulnerable. And I guess backing the Nazi, essentially, makes more political sense for this guy's re-election in his mind. Cody Fenwick from Alternate brings us this next offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The administration seems to have no idea how to reunite the families that tore apart. They have no idea. As the Trump administration struggles to clean up the mess it created when it started separating immigrant children and parents apprehended at the U.S.-Mexico border. Can we stop with the immigrant thing? I know they're immigrants, but they're refugees. I keep hearing this, that they were illegally showed up at the border. No, they didn't. They came here and presented themselves as refugees. And Stephen Miller and Bolton and John Kelly and all the rest of the racists there said this is some ploy by a bunch of brown people to come here and take our stuff. Refugees, please. A new report found that records that could help reunite the families have vanished, and some have even been destroyed. The New York Times' Caitlin Dickerson reports that much of the confusion has been driven by the fact that multiple agencies, Department of Homeland Security and Department of Health and Human Services in particular, are responsible for detaining the children. With the children moving between departments, documentation has proved a challenge. Dickerson notes that HHS isn't always clear on who among the children it is responsible for were separated from their parents by the U.S. government and who arrived as unaccompanied minors. They're all unaccompanied. They don't have their parents with them. But there were some that were ripped from the arms of their parents, and some who were a bit older who showed up on their own, and some of those older ones brought some younger ones with them. They can't tell the difference. They all look the same now, don't they? Quite a narrative we have here. The administration also announced yesterday that they have less than 3,000 children in custody who have been separated from their parents in total, an estimate that means the figure could be much larger than the 2,400 or so previously reported. They say 3,000. I think maybe I might want to add a 1 to that, as in 13,000, 23,000, 100,000. Do we really know? Perhaps the most troubling detail of the report, however, was this. In hundreds of cases, customs agents deleted the initial records in which parents and children were listed together as a family with a family identification number. And as a result, the parents and children appeared in federal computers to have no connection to one another. These are evil monsters. Bureaucrats? It is becoming clear that not only did the administration not appreciate the cruelty of the policy it embarked upon, it has also completely botched the logistics. There are thousands of children who have been callously separated from their parents, and officials have no idea how to bring them back together again. And I have mentioned this before, and I'm not alone. This is a feature, not a bug. Us this last offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, the French 77, folks. Here, have one. Well, the Republican Party has made it clear that if it keeps control of Congress, it will try again to take health care away from millions of Americans and their fellow travelers, too. Oh, yeah. The RNC is threatening to strip health care insurance from over 21 million people if the party keeps control of Congress after the 2018 midterms. Well, that's a reason for us to get out to vote. They're telling us, hey, this is what we're going to do, and they always do. RNC spokeswoman Kayleigh McEnany, she didn't know that the United States Constitution, a Bill of Rights, was written by and for rich white guys and not for, like, white women even. She didn't know that. She got all mad. Yeah. And we're a big proponent of the Graham Cassidy, McKinney said, referring to the Senate bill that would have repealed Obamacare. That was one vote short, and if we maintain the House as we expect we will, pick up a few Senate seats, Graham Cassidy will become a reality. Okay, well, that was a bill that was spearheaded by Bill Cassidy of Louisiana and Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, yeah. Like other Republican attacks on health care before it, it would convert money from Medicaid expansion into block grants, and then the states or counties could use those block grants to spend as they see fit. You know, like buying a few tanks for the cops. Or a few junkets to I don't know, Odessa and ask Vlad, will you be there to meet us? We're paying our way. Well, public opinion polling has found only 20% approved of the legislation, with only 46% of Republicans backing it. Among Americans overall, 52% disapproved of the bill. All major doctor, patient, and insurer groups similarly oppose the Republicans' harmful legislation, but as McEnany notes, the Republicans' desire to hurt those who need insurance continues to be unsatisfied. Because someone's got to be made to suffer for electing a black president. They warned us that we would suffer. All right, let's get to our break. And, of course, we'll come back and go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, what comes around? Most of the time, critics divide up between those liking a film and those who don't. Sometimes, though, the division is between those who get it and those who don't. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom is in this category. On the surface, it's about what you'd expect. Taking off from where the 2015 installment leaves off, the theme park island, abandoned to the dinosaurs, has a heretofore extinct volcano come to life, thus necessitating the creature's removal. Doing this is not without controversy, and in the few but important Senate hearing scenes with Jeff Goldblum's character Dr. McComb, the ethical issues involving whether the reconstituted animal should be saved at all are explored. The government bows out, leaving Team Claire and Owen, Bryce Dallas Howard, and Chris Pratt to go to work for the park's founder, Benjamin Lockwood, to save the creatures, not just from the volcano, but from unsavory arms dealers who seek big bucks in the creature's weaponization, especially of a new directable breed. Much of the action ends up around Lockwood's Northern California estate, which is also home to his granddaughter, who embodies a family secret, one that isn't developed here. It's either for future use or is highly symbolic given the film's end. Director J.A. Bayona from The Orphanage brings a gothic feel to the series, which oddly works. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom is representative of a subtle change in sci-fi that has occurred in recent years, from the portrayal of the creative maintenance of human dominance to honest explorations of what could come after. Given the increasingly apocalyptic politics of the day, this trend is underhandedly fitting. The film doesn't take itself too seriously, though. There's on-screen banter about whether theme park officials had engaged in franchise overreach. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at Take2MovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. When primatologists observe chimpanzees, they take note of activities like fighting, playing, touching, and grooming. And it turns out you can learn a lot about humans, we are primates after all, by observing the same behaviors in us.
Not grooming, but, who was nice to who complimented who talked to who flirted with who, all those kinds of things.
Laura Jones, an anthropologist at Emory University and Kaiser Permanente. The primates her team studied were surgeons, nurses, anesthesiologists, and other staff at 3 U.S. hospitals. The researchers observed 200 surgeries, while logging behaviors like cursing and cowering, stomping or head shaking, joking and singing, complimenting or flirting. And they found that conflict in the OR surged when male surgeons' teams were mostly male, or when female surgeons were with mostly female teams.
I would say it would be a no-brainer if we had found that all females were cooperative, but that's not what we found.
Instead, the highest levels of cooperation occurred when a female surgeon had a male surgical team, and vice versa. Perhaps, Jones says, because those mixed teams avoided male-male or female-female conflict. In fact, previous studies in primates, both human and non-human, have shown that competition is strongest between individuals of the same gender. The surgery findings are in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences.
I would say that the most practical thing to do at this point would be using this to affect training. And, of course, encourage both men and women to go into all of the disciplines, because right now they are heavily gendered.
And perhaps by diversifying the operating room, we can leave chest-beating behaviors at the door. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60 Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
If it's class warfare, we're the People's Army.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. Americans have many rights that are protected by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Our rights are also protected by state constitutions and bills of rights. However, it is important to remember that it is reasonable and fair to place limits on most rights. They're not absolute. Most people would argue that the only right that cannot be limited is freedom of belief. All other rights can be limited in certain situations. For example, freedom of expression can be limited if and when it seriously harms or endangers others. A person cannot yell fire in a crowded theater if there is, in fact, no fire. Doing so would put the health and safety of others at risk. Some rights may be limited when they conflict with other rights or with other important values and interests. For example, the right to own and use property can conflict with our interest in having a safe and healthy environment. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
Workers in America have suffered a grave defeat.
I'm Lily Ledbetter, and this is a Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
In the just-decided Janus case, the Supreme Court, 5-4, decreed that members of a union who choose not to join, but who receive all of the benefits of membership, the pay, the representation, have the right to receive all those benefits for free. They get a free ride if they want it, and there is nothing the union or the other union members can do about that. Some commentators have described Janus as a conservative decision, but that characterization is wrong. Conservative, in the lexicon and tradition of courts, means respect for and adherence to previous decisions. It's called stare decisis, and it's a venerable legal principle. The Janus decision is not conservative. It throws out stare decisis. It overrules an over 40-year-old case that has been affirmed in the years since, a decision that was unanimous when it was made in 1977. What has changed is not the law. What has changed is the composition of the court. The Janus case erases a significant part of the power of the collective voice of public sector workers. With this decision, workers have suffered a grave defeat. There's just no way around that conclusion.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
A major world survey has found that attacks on labor rights, violence against trade unionists, and threats to democratic activity have dramatically increased over the past year. The survey, called the Global Rights Index, is conducted annually by the International Trade Union Confederation. The ITUC represents national trade union centers such as the Ghana Trades Union Congress. The 2018 Global Rights Index reports on activities in 142 countries using internationally recognized indicators to assess how workers' rights are being protected or not in law and in practice. I talked to Sharon Burrow about the Global Rights Index. Ms. Burrow is the General Secretary of the ITUC. I asked her first about the index finding that the space for democratic activity in countries has been diminishing.
When freedom of association, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly is denied,
then workers themselves are at risk both of physical violence and indeed arrests. And in the worst of the countries, of course, we're still seeing they shoot trade unions. But there's no doubt that when more than 54 countries in the world have seen an increase in constraint around democratic space in these terms, then it's not just our activists who are at risk, it's actually democracy itself. So this is particularly an indicator of the increase in authoritarianism, in dictatorship, and of course the social unrest that leads to conflict, with more than 50 countries now experiencing some form of conflict. So this is not a future on which we can build human and labour rights, where freedom of association, freedom of action is actually respected. Of course, part of this is also about the right to strike, and the increase in violence against trade unions, the increase in arrests and detention is part of that, and that's increased dramatically as well.
The Global Rights Index lists the worst countries for workers' rights. What are some of these countries, and how have they been violating the rights of working people?
Well, this is not a list that any country should want to be on, but Algeria, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Colombia, Egypt, Guatemala, Kazakhstan, the Philippines, Saudi Arabia and Turkey all make up the top 10 worst countries for workers in the world. And again, that comes back to denial of freedom of association, so the right to join a union, denial of the right to strike. In fact, 87% of countries have violated the right to strike, and 81% of countries deny some or all workers' collective bargaining. Clearly, in those worst 10 countries, these things are absolutely at risk. If you take Turkey, you've seen the rise of dictatorship with a man at the helm, the President Erdogan, who's prepared to purge his opposition and simply arrest people on suspicion that they might be part of that with no due process, no trial. In the Philippines, we've seen human rights abuses right through to the point where people are shot, often with the concurrence of the president himself, who believes that's an appropriate attack on those he perceives to be involved in the drug trade. In Egypt, we've seen again our independent union simply without the freedom to act, the freedom to actually associate and organise and bargain, and that's particularly disturbing. But right across the board, what we're seeing here is the results of increasing dictatorship, authoritarianism, and tragically shrinking democracy itself.
Has violence against trade unionists been increasing over the past year?
There's no doubt about that. When you look at the increase in arrests, in violence, in denial of the right to strike, these things simply add up to a world that is not safe for activists, but a world that workers who are incredibly brave are prepared to fight for fundamental rights for themselves, for each other, for their children.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. President Trump is flexing the power of his pen, or his Twitter fingers, to try and shift NATO military spending and global oil prices this week. In the run-up to a NATO summit in Brussels, Trump sent a series of letters to NATO allies, Belgium, Germany, and Norway, telling them to meet 2006 military spending goals of 2% of GDP. In a letter to German Chancellor Angela Merkel, Trump described, quote, growing frustration in the United States that some allies have not stepped up as promised. When Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, only 4 NATO members, the US, Estonia, Greece, and the UK, met or exceeded those spending levels, and that remains true today. Some, like Belgium, Portugal, and France, are even spending less now than in 2014. Should America's allies keep dragging their feet on military spending, Trump warned Merkel it would be harder to justify American efforts in such conflicts as Afghanistan. While most NATO members are gradually increasing spending, others, like Germany, say they won't shift their budgetary priorities to impress Trump. It's safe to say divisions between NATO allies are likely to be on full view next week, the first time major heads of state will gather since a frosty G7 summit in Quebec last month. Meanwhile, with increasing sticker shock at the gas pump over the summer holidays, Trump is pressuring the OPEC oil cartel to increase production and reduce prices. In a July 4th tweet, he accused OPEC nations of failing to stem oil price increases and instead, quote, driving prices higher as the U.S. defends many of their members. When Trump took office, regular unleaded gas averaged $2.32 a gallon and now stands at $2.87, according to AAA. That's a nearly 20% increase. Last month, OPEC members decided to slightly increase oil production, but anticipated declines in Iranian exports as a result of new U.S. sanctions are expected to actually drive global oil production down through 2018. Luke Vargas, New York.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the diner of life. Weather from around the world always begins along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently, well, it looks like it's 63 degrees. We will be nearly the same as we were yesterday, which means we'll be in the upper 80s to low 90s. There is a fire right along the Oregon-California border called the Klamath Fire. Some people mistake it as being Klamath on fire, but this is actually the Klamath Fire. Klamath Fire, yes. And it's not Oregon, it's Oregon. Please. I mean, do we walk around and call it piano? Italian? Yeah. Okay, well, enough of that. Yeah, we have a fire nearby, and fortunately the winds are pushing things to the southeast of us. But the winds could shift, and we could get all that particulate matter. And I must say, I have some ash in places that we don't want ash. It accumulates. So you like in the places you don't look at very much, and then suddenly you do, and you realize, oh my God, look at all of that. And yeah, so there is some particulate matter floating about, and we don't want to breathe it in our lungs. No, indeed. Right now, the winds are out of the southwest at about, well, a negligible 1 mile per hour. And they will be shifting as they are wont to do, and they'll be 10 to 15 miles per hour, so a little bit stiffer than normal. But coming out of the west, that'll be in a couple of hours. And then later on this evening, they will shift out of the northwest and remain at 10 to 15 miles per hour, decreasing to 5 to 10, which is the normal amount tomorrow in the morning. Dry conditions will continue, and grass pollen remains high. That air quality index is at the upper regions of good at 28 parts per million, and that will be moderate pretty soon. But the good isn't very good at 28 parts per million. And the daytime UV index also remains very high at 9. Everyone take care. I'm wearing a hat. High pressure dominates the region at 30.09 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. Humidity is currently 72%. Will fall to about 26% later on in the day. Indeed. All right. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased, and these people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere in their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 84 degrees and sunny. Paris is 84 and sunny. Rome is 85 and fair. Kiev is 85 and fair. Kabul is 83 degrees and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 83 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo, Japan is 68 degrees and cloudy, and they have a thunderstorm advisory, electrical activity that may interrupt with their electrical grid. Sydney, Australia is 53 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 60 degrees and mostly cloudy with their continuing small craft advisory for winds on the bay and offshore. And New York, New York is 76 degrees and cloudy with a weather advisory of a flash flood watch. So please do take care. I see cells all over the area, and they will continue. So people in New York, take care. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted, these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. First offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays is by Luke Barnes out of Think Progress. British counter-terror police are investigating the apparent poisoning of a couple by an unknown substance, that's in quotes, just 8 miles from where Russia spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia were poisoned with a deadly nerve agent in March. The pair were found unconscious at a house in Amesbury, Wiltshire, Saturday, and were immediately rushed to hospital, where they remain in critical condition. On Wednesday, British authorities said that the victims had been exposed to the same nerve agent, Novichok, that was used to poison the Skripals earlier this year. Investigators still do not know how the pair, who spent time at Queen Elizabeth Gardens, near where the Skripals lost consciousness, had come into contact with the Novichok. Metropolitan police officials are assisting local officers with the investigation, and the British government's emergency committee, COBRA, said it was treating the incident with, quote, the utmost seriousness, end quote. Whenever a Brit says that, you know it's pretty bad, because they're not want to be, histrionic in their proclamations. The latest poisoning creates a major headache for authorities, as well as the town of Salisbury, where the Skripals were initially poisoned in March. An exhaustive military-led cleanup effort focused on the pub and restaurant they had visited, the park where they were found, a car storage facility, stations used by first responders, and the house of a detective who was one of the first at the scene. The newest development, however, raises the possibility that traces of Novichok were left throughout other parts of Salisbury and the surrounding area, presumably by the persons who carried out the hit on the Skripals. Officials have again pointed the finger at Russia, who Prime Minister Theresa May officially blamed for the Skripal poisoning earlier in the year. The UK Security Minister Ben Wallace told the BBC that Russian authorities could help significantly with the investigation by supplying them with information. But the Kremlin has said, however, that while the latest poisonings are disturbing, they have not yet received any appeal from the UK. Other Russian diplomats this week took a step further, mocking the officials investigating the new poisonings. How dumb they think Russia is to use, again, the so-called Novichok in the middle of the FIFA World Cup and after the special session of the CSP. The Russian embassy in the Netherlands posted on Twitter, the show must go on. Well, I don't know. The Brits did make it through the knockout round. You never know. I mean, the Russians were caught doping their athletes, weren't they? Meanwhile, the Russian embassy in South Africa pointed out that Britain's Porton Down Chemical Weapons Laboratory was located close to Salisbury. implying that the poison was actually an accident and cover-up. The Russian embassy in London, on the other hand, simply spent the morning ridiculing British newspaper reports about how dangerous it would be to travel to Russia for the World Cup. Well, it might be. You never know. In response to the Skripal poisoning, the British government duly expelled 23 Russian diplomats and has also begun to crack down on Russian oligarchs who have long used the UK, and especially London, to stash their wealth. It remains to be seen, however, whether the UK will respond to this latest incident with more retaliatory measures.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Finishing up here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is an article out of Raw Story by Martin Sismer. Ah, boy. Donnie Two Scoops. I don't know. You would think that Don Corleone would be able to, fire his people in person. Or, I don't know, on the other hand, when Tom was told he wasn't consigliere anymore, it was one of the kids that told him, Tom, you're out. Remember that? So, I don't know. Maybe Trump is just following to norm. Trump fired disgraced EPA boss Scott Pruitt without even talking to him, according to the Washington Post. The report is sourced to two administration officials who said that John Kelly, Trump's chief of staff, was the one to call the EPA chief and ask for his resignation. Oh, he called him, didn't even have him come in? They didn't tell him at the picnic? That's when everybody sits out there. I mean, you saw Luca Brasi. He was going over his little speech. And I hope that your first son is a masculine son. I don't know. Well, that contradicts Trump's own telling events. No, the final straw, Trump said. He came to me and he said, I have such great confidence in the administration. I don't want to be a distraction. And I think Scott felt that he was a distraction. Really? Insiders said Pruitt lasted so long because he struck an adoring tone with Trump, palling around and lavishing Trump with praise, telling Trump he was brilliant and a political revolutionary. Well, he is. He is a political revolutionary. Brilliant? I don't know. Hey, that resignation letter from Pruitt was quite something. Described as a theocratic manifesto. Yeah, this guy was anointed by God to come here and, try to harvest as much of the wealth before, the feces hits the fan. Is that what he thinks? All the world's coming to an end, and so therefore, might as well get rich in the interim. What else is there to do? I don't know. Prepare your soul. He was preparing his soul, but he's going somewhere not to the lofty climes of a cloudy environment. Nope. Hell and brimstone is where he's going. Indeed. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. And I think Independence Day weekend continues through the weekend, so have fun and be safe and sane, all right? We already have fires around here, presumably because of illegal fireworks. Damn them. So we will meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. Netroots Radio will broadcast on throughout the day and the weekend for breaking news, so stay tuned to that. And we will visit with you then on Monday in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.